probably saw the headlines about this. Middle of the weekend, I-5, downtown Seattle, the most important stretch of interstate in the state of Washington, shut down for hours on end by pro-Palestine demonstrators. Our friend Jason Rands was down there taking all sorts of video of what happened. And look, it's so deeply annoying to me, but this is a tactic that has been used over the years by really the same, let's be honest, the same group of activists. They get away with it all the time. And so they took over I-5, they shut it down. They were there for about 3 hours. We looked at video that Jason posted from the backup. There were clearly instances of ambulances that were rendered out of service. You know, we don't have any indication that the ambulances were lights and sirens trying to get to Harborview Medical Center or anything, but certainly if they're stuck in the backup, those are ambulances that cannot respond to people who might need help. So you had this, what I've got to say is a predictable situation with a response from law enforcement that was completely inadequate. And I'm going to get to who do we blame for all of this. But you had, so the highways are the jurisdiction of the Washington State Patrol. That is a state interstate. And so it is ultimately the jurisdiction of the Washington State Patrol to decide how to respond to this incident. But they had other law enforcement agencies that were called in to assist them. That's not particularly unusual either. One of them was the Seattle Police Department. And gosh, this is really one of the things that irks me the most, because you had, again, the 6-mile backup, they're diverting traffic, middle of the day, you've got this line of protesters and police trying to negotiate with them, which I think is trying to negotiate with domestic terrorists. At that point, when you are invading people's ability to move freely throughout the state, targeting infrastructure, you are domestic terrorist. So the Seattle Police Department's out there, and they were using something called POET, which is it's a fairly new entity of the Seattle Police Department. It stands for Public Order Enforcement Team. And so you'll see that on the back of their shirts, POET spelled out. And it's basically, you know, I guess their effort to appease sort of the far left activists and say, we're going to go out and try to negotiate with these people who can't be negotiated with. But anyway, the Seattle Police Department was keeping people up to date on Twitter. And they, in initial tweets, said a group of protesters walked onto Interstate 5, avoid the area, and then they come out and say, Washington State Patrol, with the assistance of SPD, issued a dispersal order for protesters to clear the highway, more information to follow. So they came out, they gave an initial dispersal order, and then like an hour later, they give a secondary dispersal order. But do you think that they followed through on it? No. So good to know that the dispersal order means nothing. You know, leave the highway or you're going to face arrest. They do it a second time. Leave the highway or you're going to face arrest. They never effected arrests. And what happened? 3 hours later, this group of protesters got to walk off the freeway, scot-free. No one was arrested. And they got to claim victory. And why wouldn't they? If I were them, I'd claim victory too. There was this individual who was clearly part of the protest because all their videos are within the crowd. And they sent out a tweet as celebrating this as a win for them. Here's a clip.
Free Palestine.
So this guy writes in this tweet, today over 200 of us shut down I-5 North for a ceasefire and a free Palestine. We were supported by hundreds more on the overpass bridge. Our numbers were so vast that no one was arrested. We keep each other safe. So they see it as a win. It is a win. They get to cause an incredibly major disruption to life for everyone else. And then they get to walk off with no consequences. And, you know, the Washington State Patrol put out this long statement, which is just word soup. I'm not even going to read the thing because it was this whole statement about, oh, we, respect people's rights. This was an inconvenience for folks. And then they said at the end that they were actively investigating and would hold people who broke the law accountable. You let them walk off the freeway. And then what? You're going to go track them down later on somehow when the vast majority of them were wearing masks and you're telling me that you're going to arrest them? Like, I don't think so. Let's be honest. Jason Rance tweeted out this photo that has a lot of people peeved, and rightfully so, where you've got State Patrol, you've got the POET team from SPD and police officers negotiating, with the leaders of this domestic terrorist bunch, and they're laughing and carrying on. And look, I get it that the goal is a peaceful resolution. And I'm not going to knock the police for trying to communicate with these individuals and talk to them about, okay, what can we do to get you guys to leave the interstate so people don't get hurt and so everyone else can go on with their lives. But after 3 hours, when they didn't do that, and you've warned them twice and given them a dispersal order, and they don't leave, they own you. At that point, they own you. And that's why you don't negotiate with terrorists. But I would say, this has been a pattern of behavior from, going back, 10 years or more, where they will try to disrupt other people's lives to make a point. And if you look at these pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine people, look at the last couple months. They took over a tree lighting in downtown Seattle, and they were just allowed to do it. They shut down the University Bridge over in the U District, and they were just allowed to do it without any consequence. So you start to go bigger and bigger. Tree lighting, hey, we got away with that. What can we do next? Bridge, got away with that. What can we do next? I-5 in the middle of the day. For 3 hours, they got away with that. And what are they going to do next? What's bigger than that? They have completely been emboldened. And they were allowed to walk off that interstate, no consequences, no condemnation. Governor Jay Inslee, Attorney General Bob Ferguson, you know what they were focused on that day? Well, it was January 6th. They were focused on condemning an act of domestic terrorism that happened 3 years ago. And they were also focused on the UW Huskies and their championship football game and putting out tweets about that. Do you think that they said anything about this over the weekend? No. Silence. So again, no consequences, no condemnation. And we wonder, well, why do they think they can do this? Because they can do this. They have done this. And because of ideology, you think if that was a group of right-wingers who had taken over a major interstate, that Trump supporters, that Jay Inslee wouldn't have said anything about it, that Bob Ferguson wouldn't have said anything about it, that Jay Inslee wouldn't have ordered the Washington State Patrol to arrest them, that he wouldn't have suggested that the U.S. Attorney's Office pursue charges against him and put him in federal prison. Come on, people.